She fired him while he was still holding his daughter's hand at the restaurant table. The call came in the middle of the only vacation he had taken in 9 years. A quiet dinner in a small coastal town where the lights were soft. The ocean whispered against the pier, and his 12-year-old daughter was smiling in a way he had almost forgotten she could. When his phone buzzed, he almost ignored it because he had promised her that this week belonged to her. But the name on the screen was his boss. Before he could even step away from the table, her voice sliced through the fragile peace, sharp and controlled, telling him that enjoying a holiday during peak season showed a lack of commitment. Her voice continued, stating that the company needed people who prioritized work, and that his position had been terminated effective immediately. He stood there stunned, with the sound of waves behind him, and the weight of silence in his chest. She had no idea who he was dining with. Across from him sat not only his daughter, but an elderly man who quietly watched the entire exchange. A man whose tailored jacket and calm eyes did not match the Moda Seafood Cafe. The man had introduced himself earlier simply as Mr. Whitmore, and asked if he could share the large table. He had listened as the single father explained that this was their first trip since his wife passed away 9 years earlier. 9 years of double shifts, missed birthdays, unpaid grief, school lunches packed at dawn, and bedtime stories told through exhaustion. 9 years of choosing survival over rest, and now the 1 week he dared to breathe had cost him everything. When he returned to the table trying to mask the tremor in his hands, his daughter immediately sensed it and asked if something was wrong. He forced a smile that felt like glass in his throat and told her that everything was fine. Mr. Whitmore set down his fork with deliberate calm and asked a simple question. Why would a loyal employee be punished for taking the first vacation in nearly a decade? The single father shrugged with quiet resignation. He explained that loyalty in the corporate world often flows in one direction, that he had stayed late every night, covered shifts without complaint, and skipped holidays without overtime, believing that stability was worth the sacrifice. As he spoke, there was no bitterness in his voice, only exhaustion. Something shifted in Mr. Whitmore's expression, a flicker of recognition, because the company that had just fired this man was one he knew intimately. He was its majority shareholder, a fact he did not reveal immediately. Instead, he chose to ask about the daughter's dreams, about the science fair she was preparing for, about the way her father never missed a parent-teacher conference. When dinner ended and the ocean air grew colder, Mr. Whitmore handed the father a simple business card without a title, asking him to call the next morning before making any decisions about his future. The next morning, he called, and within hours he found himself in a quiet office overlooking the harbor, seated across from the same elderly man who now spoke with a different tone. Mr. Whitmore explained that leadership is tested not by profit margins but by how it treats the people who keep it alive. He had built the company from a single storefront decades ago and had recently stepped back from daily operations. What he witnessed at that dinner table revealed a fracture he could not ignore. By the end of the week, the single father's termination had been reversed, not quietly, but publicly, accompanied by the resignation of the boss. The greatest shock was not reinstatement, but the offer that followed, an invitation to join a leadership development program directly under Mr. Whitmore's mentorship, not because of pity, but because of his resilience, integrity, and quiet strength. As months passed, the single father learned to speak in boardrooms with the same calm he once used to reassure his daughter. He learned that compassion and authority are not opposites, and that taking 1 week to breathe does not diminish a decade of loyalty. Years later, when he eventually stood at a company gathering, sharing his story, he did not speak about revenge or humiliation. He spoke about dignity, about how a man who feels invisible can still carry extraordinary worth. As he stepped down from the podium, he saw his daughter in the front row, taller now, proud and unafraid. He understood that losing his job had not been the end of stability, but the beginning of something deeper. In the months that followed his reinstatement, the single father walked back into the same building. But this time, he entered not with pride or resentment, but with a steady understanding that survival had taught him something power never could. Mr. Whitmore did not simply restore a job, he restored a voice, inviting him into meetings where decisions shaped thousands of livelihoods, asking him what it felt like to choose between overtime and bedtime stories. Gradually, policies began to shift. Vacation structures were re-examined, emergency leave was redefined, and supervisors were trained not only to evaluate performance, but to recognize humanity. Families across the company began to breathe without punishment. At home, the transformation was even more profound. His daughter noticed the difference before he did the way. He no longer checked emails during dinner, the way laughter returned to the kitchen, the way he seemed lighter. One evening, as they sat on the same beach where everything had changed, she asked him if he was angry at the woman who fired him. He looked at the horizon and said that anger would mean allowing her decision to define him. Years later, when Mr. Whitmore finally retired for good, he entrusted the company to a leadership team that included the once overlooked single father, a man who had learned that compassion and accountability can stand side by side. During the final celebration dinner, held in that same coastal town, he reserved the largest table, inviting employees and their families to sit together, telling them that this place reminded him of the night he thought he had lost everything. As he watched his daughter walk confidently along the pier, no longer burdened by uncertainty, he understood that the true inheritance he was building for her was not financial security, but an example. Years later, he returned to that same restaurant not as a man who had been fired, but as a man who had been forged. He felt a quiet gratitude for that pain because it had revealed who he truly was. As he sat at the table with his daughter, now preparing for college, she reached across and squeezed his hand, reminding him without words that the most important promotions happen at home, not in boardrooms. When he finally stepped outside alone to watch the sunset, he allowed himself to remember the humiliation, the fear, and the fragile dignity he fought to protect. Instead of bitterness, of felt pride. Hardship had not hardened him, it had refined him.